Hello and welcome back to the Little Craft House. If you guys have been following me for a while, you know that I love making polymer clay earrings, and I am on here pretty much every week showing you different ways to do different styles of earrings. Well, today I thought we would take it way back to basics and start from scratch for those of you who are new or still wanting to take the plunge into making some earrings. So today we are going to start from the very start and we're going to work all the way through to the end. So I'm going to include things like which clay to use, how to design your earrings. Then we're going to go through baking and assembling and everything else along the way until we have a final finished pair of earrings that are wearable. So if you are wanting to take the plunge into making earrings for yourself, or you've been doing it for a while and you just want a little refresher, or you might have some burning questions that you want answered, hopefully I can answer them today, and hopefully I can give you guys some tips and tricks and get you making some pretty pairs of earrings. Okay, so to start with, we are going to talk about the types of polymer clay to use. So my favorite type of polymer clay to use are these ones here. So both from the Sculpey brand, we have Sculpey Soufflé and Sculpey Primo. Now, I like to use these ones for a number of reasons. Firstly, the range of colour choices is huge. So there's lots of colours to choose from in both of these ranges. The Soufflé brand is slightly more of a matte finish compared to the Primo brand, and it also has a slight little texture to it. So they like to refer to it as a suede-like texture. So it's got a little bit of, if I say gritty, I don't mean super gritty, but it's got that little bit of texture to it already within the clay. And the Primo is more of a shinier finish. So both really good to use. They can be mixed. So I don't use either one exclusively. I generally use both within the same project. Now, other clays that I quite often use as well are the Fimo brand. So that comes in Fimo Soft and Fimo Effect, and also Fimo Professional. Now, both of these ones are a really good quality, strong clay, but they're not as packet ready as the Soufflé and Primo. So these ones will take a little bit more to get softened up and workable. And that softening up and workable is called conditioning, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But yeah, these ones will take a little bit more work to start with because they are quite firm and hard straight from the pack. Now, another one that I also like to use is the Cernit brand. Cernit has some really nice effects within their ranges. So the metallic effect, the pearl effect, and there's a nature one as well, which has got like the granites through. They are really beautiful, and I like to use a lot of those more for my accenting and just as features within my pieces. Cernit can be a little bit temperamental. Sometimes you'll find that they're quite firm from the pack. Other times they can be kind of sticky and soft. It always depends on what colors you have and the freshness of those. So it can be a little bit temperamental and can take a little bit more to get working, but again, is a really good finish and a really good quality clay. Now, one thing that I do try and avoid with the brands of clay are the cheaper brands, the more home brand style clays. They can be a little bit sticky and tacky, and the quality of them isn't always as good. So if it's a cheaper brand, it's generally for a reason, and sometimes the finishing won't be as good, and you can be more likely to crack, get cracks form or the air bubbles within it. So I try to stay away from those. However, sometimes I will use them to accent bits or put on top of clays, put on top of my projects for certain little features, but I would never use them as a base clay because, yeah, just structurally they're not quite as sound when it comes to doing jewelry. So something else that is really good about all of these types of polymer clay is that they can all be mixed together. So if you would like to use one of the brands as a base and another brand on top for your details, you can do that. And you can also then mix those scraps together to create new colors, create marbled effects, anything like that, and still bake them together because they are compatible with each other. There are a few exceptions to the rule, and there's a few different things that you need to keep in mind. We'll cover that in later sections, but just to mention now that they are interchangeable, so if you've got a few of each, you're able to use them together in the same project. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the design of your earrings. So in polymer clay terms, when we create a flat design and then cut our pieces from it, we refer to that as a slab. So when you're starting as a beginner, a slab is the best way to start. It's the easiest and can be the least complicated to do. You can, however, get extremely complicated, do lots of details. Obviously, the sky is your limit when it comes to creating. So what I thought I would do to share some inspiration to start with is show you some of the prototypes that I've made up in the past. So if you go back to my channel and scroll down the full-length tutorial videos, you'll see that there are lots of tutorials on there showing you how to do all different sorts of designs. They're all suitable for beginners and people just starting out. They're also suitable if you've been doing clay for a long time and you're just looking for some inspiration to start from. So sometimes what I like to do is design a slab and then bake it up as is without cutting my earrings, and then that is a prototype that I can refer back to when I'm short of ideas. So that's what all of these are here. So I'll just show you some of the designs I have done previously, and sometimes these designs just get me inspired to create something else. So a lot of these are featured in my tutorials and also my shorts. So if you see something that takes your fancy, you can go back and see if you can find the full-length tutorial for it. So in today's tutorial, we will do a very simple design, and that way it can, if you want to do something more complicated, you can go back and have a look at a different tutorial for doing different designs. Okay, so to start with, I have got my polymer clays here. I just cut off a piece from my block and I now need to condition them up. So conditioning just means getting them soft and workable and ready to use. Now, as I mentioned before, the brands that I like to use are already slightly soft. However, we do need to condition them and just get them worked up a little bit more, because at the moment they are not as soft as what they could be, and by conditioning them they will give us a better quality product at the end. So I've just sliced my clay down to being slightly thinner. It's a bit hard to work with as a big chunk, so we just slice it down into a thinner piece, and then with an acrylic roller we're just going to start rolling it. Now, as you can see, it's already moving and nice and soft to start working with. If I was using one of those firmer clays, it would be a little bit harder to get going to start with. So if you find that your clay is a little bit firm and it's not rolling nicely, you might find that it is a little bit crumbly, or it's just not conditioning down nicely. There's a few things that you can do to soften your clay. So I find that in winter, the clays can be slightly firmer as well, because there isn't the warmth in the air. So the few things that I like to do is I always keep this wheat pack on my lap in winter, because this room is really cold. So this is one of those wheat packs. It's got wheat in it. You pop it in the microwave to warm it up, and I sit it on my lap to keep me warm. Well, this can also help me to condition the clay. What I will do is get my clay in a piece of plastic or baking paper. So I've got some baking paper handy here. If this was really firm and crumbly, what I would do is get it down, try and roll it thinner, but if not, I would do it as the chunk. I'd just pop it in the baking paper to keep it clean, and then just sandwich it in the wheat pack for a few minutes. Obviously the wheat pack isn't too hot, it's just warm, but I would sandwich it in there, leave it for a few moments just to add some warmth into the clay. Now, if you didn't have that, you could sit on your clay. I know that sounds really silly, but you could just sit on it. If you've got hot hands, just keeping it in your hands to keep it warm for a few minutes, that would also help. So that's how I'll put warmth into the clay to help to soften it. In summer, however, you may find that you have a different issue. And in summer, you might find that your clays are quite sticky and they stick to your roller, they stick to your tile, they get all, they fall apart because they're too sticky. So to firm up the clay, you can pop it into your fridge or freezer for a few minutes, and that will cool the clay down and hopefully make it a little bit more workable. If that doesn't work, however, you can just get a piece, oh, I don't have anything handy. You can get a piece of paper, like the type that you would put into your printer. And again, if you can roll it out thinner, sit it onto the printer paper and leave it, probably sandwich it actually, sandwich it in the printer paper, leave it for a good couple of hours. What you'll find will happen is the extra oils within the clay will seep out, and they'll go into the paper, and then that will reduce those oils within there and hopefully again make that slightly firmer clay. And the reason that I like to wrap it is to keep it clean, because you will notice that polymer clay will attract every little bit of dirt going around. So if you've got pets, you'll find your clay will attract that cat hair, dog hair, human hair. You'll find that it will attract anything like that. It will stick to it easily. So if I'm going to put it somewhere to warm it up or cool it down, I will wrap it either back in its plastic wrapper or in a bit of baking paper, and then that will help to keep it clean. Okay, so back to conditioning. I am just going to give it a few rolls here. And every time I fold it, I'm going to turn that fold line so that I'm pushing the air outwards. So I wouldn't roll like that, because that's going to keep any air trapped in that fold line. So each time just fold it and flip it and keep rolling it until it is nice and soft. Now, a way that you can tell that your polymer clay is conditioned enough is when you fold it over and give it a squeeze, you'll notice that the clay has folded nicely and it hasn't cracked. So that is nicely conditioned. Now, one thing you'll notice is that I am working on a ceramic tile. So ceramic tile is my preference because, as you saw as I was rolling this clay before, it is sticking to the tile. Now, I was just rolling this one out here, and as you can see, it has an air bubble in it. So one way to get rid of the air bubble is to get a knife and just put a little slice in. We want to pop that bubble, squeeze the air out, and then we can continue. We don't want to keep those bubbles in there because they will get trapped in and will try and escape during the cooking process, and then you'll end up with lumpy clay. So we need to get rid of any air bubbles as they arise. Now, another way that you can condition your clay is if you have a pasta machine, a pasta maker, pasta roller, clay conditioner, whatever you want to call it, if you've got one of these machines handy. So what I will always do is give my clay a little roll down to start with. I'll start the conditioning process with the hand roller just to soften the clay a little bit, because we don't want to put too much pressure and strain on the gears of our machine. So I'm going to have it set on the thickest setting, and it does have a, this machine has a handle which I'm about to turn. So I'm going to pop it through there and then again fold in half and see how it's doing that cracking. That's what I was talking about before with it not being conditioned yet, because it is cracking, not folding nicely. So again though, that fold line is going to go on the side. I'm going to pass it through, and we're going to keep doing this until it softens and does that nice fold rather than the cracking. This clay is a little bit older than the other one that I used. I had it pre-cut up in a storage tub for a while, so this one will take a little bit longer to condition than the one that I had cut straight from the pack. Now, polymer clay you can keep for a really long time. As a general rule, it doesn't dry out as it gets older, so you don't need to keep it in an airtight container. However, airtight container or a little zippy bag will mean that it won't get dirty during storage. You can see the folding is getting better. It's not cracking as much. So we're just going to keep putting this through, and having one of these machines does definitely make things easier, because if I was doing this by hand, with the hand roller, it would definitely take longer. And I can move the thickness down slightly as well, which will also help. There we go, that's much softer and more workable now. There we go. So now I've got my clays conditioned up. We need to get it to the ideal thickness for creating our earrings. So I like to have my earrings at approximately 2.5 to 3 millimeters in thickness. So there's a couple of ways that we can achieve that thickness of our clay. So the easiest way is using that pasta machine to put it through on, for me it's the thickest setting, and that will give me the right thickness that I want. So that way it's already done and it's already at that right level. Other ways you can do it is something like a frame, which we have these ones on our website. They are a 3 millimeter acrylic, and therefore you can put that down, let me show you, around your clay. Then when you use your roller and you roll it, it's going to keep that level equal and at the same thickness. Another way you can do it is using some guides, some thickness guides. Again, same sort of thing, putting it on the side, rolling, it will create the level thickness. However, if you don't have any of these, you can just use some pop sticks, bind them together. Another popular way people like to use is some cards. So you could use playing cards or business cards or something, stack them into the thickness that you like, and then pop those onto either side as well. And then that would also create a guide for having an equal thickness. So now we've come to the time to cut our shapes out. So what I like to do is, because I'm working on a tile, I like to just make sure that my clay has bonded with the tile before I cut my shapes. So just giving a very gentle roll over, putting a slight bit of pressure on, and that will help the clay to stick to the tile. And then when we cut our shapes, it will stick to the tile and not stick in the cutter. That's the goal. Hopefully that will work. Okay, so let's talk shape cutters for a second. This is my personal collection. I have a lot of shape cutters to choose from. So basically they are like cookie cutters, but a smaller version which are more suitable for earrings. So cutters come in all different shapes and sizes and different types. So the 3 types that I use the most, however, are a 3D printed version, metal versions, and these ones here are plastic. Now, there are lots of differences in the types of cutters depending on where they have come from and who has made them. Some are super sharp, some will be a little bit blunt. You will learn along the way what types you like and what features you like within your polymer clay cutters. There are some other options as well. You can get things like templates and stencils. You can do freehand cutting of your shape using a scalpel knife, or you can do organic shapes where you're rolling and pressing down without using any cutters. So yeah, there's lots of different ways to explore making shapes. Today, however, I am going to be using a 3D printed cutter. I'm going to use this flower cutter, and I also have a set of these circle cutters as well. I think I need this size today. Okay, so I'm going to start by cutting out my shapes. I want to do 2 of each shape. Now, you might notice that once your shape has been cut, it might have a few little rough edges on it. So I like to smooth these out now whilst my clay is still raw. I find it easier than sanding afterwards. So just by pressing gently around the edges just to smooth it out. If you find that there's a lot of clay around the edge, you can always use your knife while it is on the tile. You could just go around very gently with the knife and trim off any of those extras. But I do find it's easier to clean up whilst the clay is raw than wait until afterwards when it is cooked. Now, with these pieces that are bonded to the tile, we need to release them. Oh, but first, actually, I need to cut the centers out of my flowers. So I think, yes, that's the right size. So I'm going to cut a center out of each of these flowers. And now we need to release them from the tile. So if I was to try and just pull it up from the edge there, I'm going to distort them a little bit. So I'm going to use a flexi blade, and that is going to scrape underneath and pull it up off of the tile. So I'm going to put a slight little bend into my blade, and I'm going to scrape it up. This can take a little bit of practice, but it's definitely a skill that's worth learning because it makes making your clay pieces so much easier. Okay, so next up, let's talk about making holes to join these together. So what I'm going to do is put my pieces in the order that I would like them to be once they are assembled. And then I know where I would like the holes to be. So you have a couple of options for holes. As a beginner, the best thing to use is just a pointy tool. This one's quite sharp. You can use a pointy tool. You can use a pin or a needle, as long as it has a thickness the same as the jump rings or slightly larger than the jump rings you are going to use. So we're going to talk about the jump rings more so afterwards, but in general you would like your hole to be between 1 and 2 millimeters. So I'm going to use this tool to firstly just put a little dot where I would like the holes to go. And if you have a electric drill and you choose to use an electric drill after baking, you can leave these little guide holes there. Now, because I have been doing polymer clay for quite a while and I tend to do large batches, I do use my Dremel drill. I use this for the drilling with the smaller drill bit on it, and I also use it for buffing around the edges of my pieces, which I'll talk about afterwards. But as a beginner, just using a pointy tool is definitely sufficient enough. So if you're going to use your electric drill afterwards, I would leave my guide holes there and bake as is, but today I'm going to use this pokey tool to make those holes. So I'm just going to go back in over the top. I have to go over properly, so sorry, I'm kind of blocking your view here, and I'm just going to kind of give it a twist to get it through and just to make the hole all the way through. And I'm going to do this with each one of these. And what we can do afterwards, if the hole hasn't gone completely all the way through, once it's baked, we can go through with the pin or with the pokey tool and fix the holes up and make them all the way through. Okay, so we're now up to our baking stage. So I've got my baking tray here and I'm going to line it with a piece of baking paper. And we're going to pop our pieces onto the tray. So again, I'm going to use my blade to slide underneath just in case they have pressed back onto the tile. And then I'm just going to transfer them over. Okay, so now we're going to talk about our times and temperatures that we use for baking or curing our clay. So the baking process is referred to as curing in the polymer clay world. So to find out how long you need to cure your clays for, we are going to look at the packages. So they will vary depending on which clay you use. So for both the Primo and Souffle brands, on the side it gives a recommendation for temperature and for times. Now, I am a little bit of a rule breaker and I will follow the temperature to the T. But I don't agree with that timing that is listed on there. So I will follow the temperature, but not the timing. We want to make sure that that temperature is not hotter. If we go hotter, we risk our products burning or discoloring the clay, especially whites and lighter colours. They tend to go yucky, yellowy, brown colours if we burn them. So we don't want to do that. What we do want to do is cure our clays to being a nice, flexible consistency. And I don't think that the time recommended is actually adequate for what we are doing. So over the years, I have tried and tested many different timings. What works best for me is between 45 minutes and an hour. And I find that my clay comes out well cured and still slightly flexible, and my pieces have lasted a long time. So that's what works for me with both of the Primo and Souffle. Obviously, you can conduct your own tests to check how things cure in your own ovens, but that is what I do. Now, if you are using a Fimo Professional or Fimo Soft, the cooking temperatures are different. So these ones only have 110 degrees Celsius as their recommended temperature, and they also recommend the 30 minutes. And with the Cernet, their baking instructions are on the back, and that one is also a 130 degrees. So if I was combining these clays in a project, I would either bake to whatever the base clay was, because if it was a base slab with pieces on top, I would want to make sure that that base piece was cooked properly. So I would go according to that. If I was combining the clays, doing a marbling effect, or I had combined two colours to make a new colour, then I would probably just go with either what was the most clay used within that project. Okay, so let's pop our earrings into the oven to cure. My little oven here has a funny little timer on it, and it only goes for a maximum of 30 minutes. So I do check it after the 30 minutes, and then that's when I will then pop it on for longer, depending on how much more is needed. Okay, so I have got these out of the oven now. They are finished cooking. So we are now going to get them ready to assemble into the earrings. Now, one way that you know that your clay is definitely cooked enough is that it will have a little bit of flexibility. Now, don't go folding your clay completely in half, but a little bit of flex is what you are aiming to have. Don't try and fold it completely in half, because it's not made to do that, and it possibly will break. So just a little bit of flex is what we are aiming for. That means that your clay is cooked well enough. Now, as you can see, some of these pieces have a little bit of clay around the edges. Still, they're not perfectly smooth. So there's a couple of ways that we can fix this. Firstly, if you have a little scalpel knife, you can wipe away at it to try and smooth it out. This works well for taking off big chunks of clay too, if there's big chunks there. But otherwise, you just need to grab yourself a little bit of sandpaper. This one's quite a fine grit sandpaper. Maybe it's a 400. And just very gently, as you can tell, this piece is well used, very gently just sand around the edges. That will smooth off those extra bits. Now, another option, if you didn't want to use the sandpaper and you have an electric drill, is to get yourself a buffing attachment. This is what I tend to use, one of these little felt buffing pads, putting it on your electric drill and then running it around the edges. That will also help to smooth off the edge. Now, I'm just going to go back through and fix up some of these holes as well, just in case the hole hasn't come through properly on the back. I'm just going to get my pointy tool again and just twisting it ever so gently and applying a slight bit of pressure through until it comes through the other side. And then I'm going to go from the back to the front, doing the same motion. It's going to make our holes big enough to use. Okay, now we are up to our assembling stage. So once again, I'm just going to put them back into the order of how I want to assemble them. And I'm going to get my jump rings. So these little circles here are called jump rings. I like to use them in the size 1mm thickness and 8mm in diameter. So I'm going to grab a couple of these, pop them down here. And then we're going to get our pliers. Now, it's best to use 2 pairs of pliers because we don't want to use our fingernails and break our fingernails, and we also don't want to put pressure onto our pieces. So using 2 pairs of pliers is best. Now, we need to open our jump rings. To open a jump ring, we're going to hold with 1 pair of pliers, and we're going to take the other side in the other hand, and we are going to twist our jump rings until they open. Okay, see how they open like that? What we don't want to do, we don't want to do this. Oh, I don't even know if I can do it. We don't want to open them like that, because when we go to close them, it is much harder to close them together and make it meet up nicely. This is where you end up with gaps and open jump rings. You also end up weakening that base part there as well. So we don't want to pull our jump rings open like that. We want to twist them so that way when we go to close it, they will line back up and be a perfectly closed circle again. Now, jump rings do come in a range of colours and sizes. So obviously, depending on the positioning of your hole will depend on the size jump ring you like. So I like to use 8mm because that always works well for me in my spacings. However, if I was going to join something much thinner on, like a charm or something, then I might need to use a smaller ring. Or if my pieces were larger, I may need to use a larger ring. Okay, so we are nearly finished with our pair of earrings. So this is how they are looking so far. And the final thing that we need to do is attach our earring posts so that we can actually wear them. So in the jewelry industry, things like the jump rings, any sort of hooks or posts or any components that you put on to assemble the earrings together, we refer to those as findings. So when it comes to our earring posts, we do have quite a few different ones to choose from. Let's just take that piece out. So these ones here are some earring posts. These ones are an 8mm post. So the 8mm refers to the pad size, and the pad is where you'll place your glue to then glue on. Now, I think that this is going to be too big. It is. It's too big for this pair of earrings because, as you can, it's not sitting right. It loops down into that hole. So I need a smaller size. So if 8mm is too big, we're going to try a 6mm. I don't have many 6s left. So the 6mm pad is a lot smaller, 2mm smaller to be precise. And if I put that on, that one fits pretty much perfectly on there. So that is the one that we are going to use. Now there's a number of different ways that you can attach your earring posts on. My favourite way that I've been using for years is by using a 6000 glue. So this one is a nice strong super glue that will bond plastics and metals together, and so that is what they are, the components that we're looking for when we're gluing our earrings together. So just a small dab of that into the position. Now, when it comes to adhesives, please do a bit of research on these. There is lots of different ones out there. Some will work for some people, some won't work. I love this E6000 glue, but a lot of people don't. For me, I find it always works. Okay, and I'm going to leave these now to cure for at least 24 hours to make sure that that glue is securely holding. So we have now completed our pair of beginner polymer clay earrings. So I hope you guys have had any of your questions answered, and I hope that you've enjoyed following along with me whilst we make these beautiful little dangles. If you do have any other questions that you would like answered, or topics and things that you would like covered, please leave me a comment in the comment section and I will try my best to answer the questions for you. And if there is something else that you'd like me to go through, I can make a tutorial about that as well. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed this. I certainly have, and I can see myself wearing this pair of earrings all the time. I'm loving these colours. I shall leave you now with a couple of clips of me modelling my new favourite pair of earrings. Thank you once again for joining me, and I will see you again next week. Bye!